Hey everyone, it's Laura of Mind Over Muscle, and today is a mini movement flow that you can do um, for if you're bending, picking things up. I'm working on moving right now as I film this, so there's lots of stooping, bending over, kneeling to get to things, and so this is a little movement flow that I like to do to get my knees, my hips, and my ankles feeling good for that type of work. All right, so the first thing I like to start with is, and you can put something under your knees for this, and it can be just like a folded up towel. It doesn't have to be something like this. And I'm in hand and knee position here. I tuck my toes. You can leave them untucked if it feels better, but I'm reaching my hips back to my heels. And at first you might find that your tailbone tucks under, kind of like this, and rounds. That might feel good to go in kind of a child's pose if you're familiar with some yoga terminology. So I'm just rocking hips to heels. The more time I spend doing this, I want to slow down and really notice how far can I go back with my hips without letting my tailbone tuck under like that. So I find my neutral here to start, and then I shift my hips back nice and slow so I can feel if it tucks on me. And right about there, I feel like a pull, like it wants to tuck, so I have to think about it. The farther my hips can go back without tucking, the more my knees have to work here and get a full range of motion. If your knees are like, nah, I don't feel like going that far back, you could put a towel back behind your knees, and that'll limit your range of motion so you can go back farther. So you won't go back as far and put the pressure on the knees. If this is too much for your wrists, you could also put a towel underneath the heel of your hand and put your fingers down on the ground so that your wrists don't get overworked. So this one's great. A lot of times when we're moving, we're on the floor doing things like this. So now we're going to transition to some kneeling. So I'm going to go from the side view here. I'm going to start with my toes tucked. Put something under your knees if you need it. And then I'm going to untuck my toes. We do a lot of interesting new novel shapes as I'm packing things up, and I'm finding that I'm getting a lot of these movements in anyway, but I'm going back and forth. I can rock side to side if that feels good. And then I'm going to stay with my toes untucked if it feels comfortable. Feel free to put something by your hips if you need to. And I'm shifting my hips over. Again, you might be working on something on the floor where you want to change up your position. And again, use a towel. I love towels. I always tell my students to have towels with them for many reasons, but this is another type of bolstering that you can do. So I'm switching side to side. Going to my right is a lot harder. And so I'm working on that kneeling positioning. Another type of kneeling is kind of like a lunge kneeling. So I'm here on this tall kneeling position. I can play with my toes tucked and untucked. And then bring one leg in front of the other. Getting the body used to lots of different things. You might even play with, okay, I'm going to switch and then reach out for something in front of me. If you do something like this on a more regular basis, then when you have those big things where you're like pulling a whole bunch of stuff out, maybe you're gardening, maybe you're moving and packing like I am, but you'll find that your body is more prepared to take on those shapes, so you'll be less sore. The final thing here is a lot of times I'm going to use this as my thing I'm going to pick up, so it helps to have something that you're going to pick up. I'm going to start with it on a high end, so you could use a book on its end and stand it up, like a nice hard-covered book. Maybe you have a dictionary or something like this. Phone book might be nice if it can stand on end. And I'm going to reach down for it and then put it back down on the ground. Reach down. And as I'm doing this, I recognize, oh, it's actually safer, it's less hard on my back to have it close to me, less work on the low back than if I have it far away from me. So you can play with how close it is and see how that feels. This is a very light foam object, so I'm not going super heavy. And notice here that I'm taking my hip back behind my ankle with a straight leg as I'm picking this up and putting it down. And then I'm going to put it on its shorter ends. You might need it up a little bit higher if your range of motion isn't there, but I'm going to bend my knees this time and pick it up and then put it back down. So I can get a little bit lower because I have a knee bend here. We're trying to keep the back out of this by moving at the hip joint. So if you notice here, remember that rocking we did on knee hand position? I said don't tuck your tailbone under. I'm doing the same hip motion here, but now I'm loading it a little bit heavier. The other piece here is if your knees bother you, I'm keeping a vertical shin. Many of us have a tendency to go like this and put things down, and that puts a lot of pressure on the knees. So if you back your hips up and then come here, so we're backing the not just the hips up, but we're backing the knees and the hips up as we do this, and that's our bent knee hip hinge. If you are a person who likes to go to the gym, it's a deadlift. This is the deadlift. The one we did just before this was a straight leg deadlift or a good morning, except we're not weighted up here. And I've got it close to my feet. All right, so now I'm ready to, I'm not gonna be stooping anymore because I just worked on this, but I'm going to be using my hips, using the backs of my legs, and be able to kneel without having as much pressure on low back, knees. And I hope that this serves you well as you're moving things about and maybe cleaning up house, spring cleaning, whatever it may be. Let me know how it goes. I'd love to hear how this helps. Bye, everyone.